A Chinese AI lab may have just reset the price of frontier level AI work. Moonshot has introduced Kimi K3, a massive new model built for reasoning, coding, and long context work. But I'm not going to tell you that China has won the AI race, and I'm definitely not going to tell you to cancel your current AI subscriptions today. The real question is, how much more useful would Kimi 3 be to, or have to prove? The real question is much more useful. What would Kimi K3 have to prove before it deserves part of your workflow? Because a giant parameter count, an impressive benchmark, and a low advertised price, which it really doesn't have, doesn't make something a good production tool. So let's start with what's official, and then we'll compare it with outside reporting, hands-on demonstrations, and the evidence that is still missing. So this is the Moonshot AI page. And as you can see, Kimi K3 is promoted in the front. It says, quote, the new frontier of intelligence, 2.8 trillion parameters, natively multimodal, 1 million token context, and it's built for long horizon coding, knowledge work, and deep reasoning. I can confidently say a lot of these benchmarks and what they're talking about is them trying to say this is just as good as any other agentic model. Reuters reports that Kimi K3 is a 2.8 trillion parameter open weight model that's positioned to challenge the leading American systems. But there's an important catch. When you look at the article, and we know the API is available now, outside reporting is saying that the complete model weights are expected on July 27th. That means that the product itself can't be tested through Moonshot broadly. And while the decisive open weight release is still pending, my short verdict is pretty simple. Kimi K3 is important enough to test, but it has not proven enough to trust blindly. And that's the first trap. It's about treating a 2.8 trillion parameter model like it's got straight horsepower. But model size does not automatically equal useful intelligence. And in a mixture of expert level models, the total parameter count is not even meaning that every parameter is active for every token. So to understand why, let's look at how Moonshot described the previous generation. So for K2, they basically said it was a 1 trillion parameter model, but only 32 billion activated parameters. And so those are K2 numbers, not K3 specifications. But the point is simply that the total model size and active computation are not necessarily going to be the same. And so the question is going to be, for a business standpoint, can Kimi K3 produce an acceptable result on valuable repeated work? And this is where the model stops only being a technology story, but also a purchasing decision that people start really going in through. And so if we think about this model launch, one thing that's definitely important to kind of take note of is just the actual cost of the model. And the reality is Kimi is pricing this as just as competitive, if not more expensive than other models. Specifically, as you can see here, while its overall performance still trails the most powerful proprietary models, Claude Fable 5 and 5.6, it did demonstrate frontier level performance, but at a pretty substantial cost. Quote, as for the pricing, which is the main thing being closely watched, Kimi K3 is pricing at 30 cents per million cached input tokens and $3 per million non-cached input tokens, and then $15 per million output tokens. That's pretty much in line with all of the very expensive models that exist today and some of the more, I would say, state-of-the-art models as well. So reporting can currently verify that Moonshot announced that their product and performance claims are solid, but we can't just turn those into production outcomes, right? Open weight is not identical to open source. I can make another video on that another day, but what you need to know is whether the weight actually ship and what license is governing those weights and what hardware is going to be required and whether you're going to be able to actually self-host this model and have it in a way that makes economic sense. You know, a 1 million token context window is also a capacity claim. It does not prove the model will retrieve the correct detail or anything else. And it's also not going to tell you your total cost because you might have retries, tool calls, latency monitoring, human editing, and failed outputs. And so a model that costs half as much per token but requires twice as many retries won't end up being cheaper. You also need to look and check the provider's current data terms before sending your customer information, any proprietary code, or even internal documents. A lot of organizations are still going to prioritize and prefer models that are built on American soil. And so the current verdict at this point is that Kimi K3 is credible enough to test, but it's not proven enough to standardize. And notice what we just did. We went to the official page. We checked the outside reporting. We're also going to watch a real demonstration, which I'll show you in a second, that can show us a perspective of it. But the reality is, for any major AI launch, we really need to look at a practical decision. You know, you need to test one. Test one is whether or not you can get to outcome parity, choosing one task with a real acceptance standard It could be fixing a failing test, analyzing a spreadsheet, producing a source research memo, or extracting clauses from a document you are allowed to use. Give each model the same prompt, context, tools, and scoring rubric, and if possible, grade the output without knowing which model produced them. Then you track factual accuracy, completion, tool failures, editing time, and whether the result survives the next step in the workflow. A beautiful draft that breaks downstream automation is not going to be parity. Run the task more than once to see if that one successful output may be followed by a failure afterwards or something like that. And then lastly, does the model actually meet the acceptance standard consistently enough that a human would approve the work? So let's look at one test that others are putting from a YouTube video that was published today.
All right, guys, Kimi K3 has finally dropped, and we have our first results of the Bridge Mind Horror House game. Look at the graphics. This is probably the best graphics from this game that I have ever seen. This is better than Fable 5, and this is better than GPT 5.6 Soul. Look at how good this horror house game is. If you guys remember, when we built it with Grok 4.5, it did not one-shot it, okay? This is a complete one-shot. There are no bugs. Here's the second key. The goal of this game is that we have to find 3 keys and escape the house and make sure that we don't run into any monsters. But look at this, guys. The graphics on the game are probably the best that I have seen from any AI model. That means better than Fable 5. That means better than GPT 5.6. We just have to find this final key, and here it is right here. Okay, let's grab this key, and let's see what happens. Okay, the screen just went dark, and now we have to run. Let's see. We have to keep our eye out for the ghost, but let's try to get to the front door. Oh, okay. All right, guys. It found us.
And so that is a really good example of what that first test can look like. It can be a full demo. It can be a full experiment. It can be something that you actually need, but it's a full run that you can actually see if you will get an output that humans will approve and test that across multiple models. Test 2 is full run economics. Record the input and output tokens, your wall clock time, your retries, any human editing that you need to do, and then understand the cost per accepted output, not per million tokens. So here's an example. If Model A costs $1 but produces an acceptable result only half the time, while Model B costs $1.50 and succeeds 9 times out of 10, Model B may be the less expensive production system. The sticker price is not the workflow price, and the pricing pressure may not stop with one API. Here's how another developer framed the broader market consequence.
That doesn't mean the open weight nature of the model isn't great for the market as a whole. It's going to make pricing way more competitive. And I would be genuinely surprised if this doesn't force Anthropic to rethink some of the Opus release that they have coming in the not too distant future. If they still price it the same they did before and the numbers end up worse than Kimi's, Anthropic's going to be in a rough place. I think I've said everything I have to about this model. It's unbelievable at 3D. It's really damn good at visual stuff, especially coding and UI. And it's just overall a really good model. It no longer feels like it's good for open weight. It now feels frontier class in many different ways.
And that is huge. It now feels frontier class in many different ways is really the crux of what's talking there and what that gentleman was talking about. Test 3 is exit safety. Keeping your prompts and evaluations model neutral, log model versions, and then maintain a premium model fallback for high-risk work. If you consider self-hosting after the weights arrive, verify the license, quantization quality rather, throughput, infrastructure cost, and a security review before calling any of this cheap. And then lastly, as you know, keeping a small set of regression tasks too, so that every time the provider changes the model version, you can actually rerun those same tasks. And an AI product can improve overall when we really know that there's certain things that it can actually end up getting worse at too. And that's why a lot of those tests and evaluations make a lot of sense. Version tracking turns that surprise into something that's much more measurable so that after you get a new model version, you can understand where your regression is actually going. And then outcome parity is going to tell you whether the model works. Full rank economics tells you whether the model is going to save you money. And then your exit safety is going to prevent those savings from becoming a dependency. For creators, the advantage is not generating more generic content. It is building a research and production system that can change models without starting over. Keep your source log, claims table, script rubrics, thumbnail tests, and editing checklists independent from any one AI company. Then a cheaper model becomes leverage instead of a migration project. For founders, do not announce an immediate vendor switch. You might want to route a small amount of low-risk work through a shadow evaluation to compare accepted outputs, escalate failures, and then increase usage only when your outcome parity and economics both hold. For employees, you're going to use honestly the same process personally. right? You're going to choose a recurring task, create a rubric, avoid using any sensitive data or anything like that, and then just keep an honest record of the time that was saved. And then for investors, the important question is not simply whether Kimi K3 is going to hurt one AI company or one chip stock. The question is whether value and where value is going to move when a capable base of models become less scarce. Lower model prices could increase usage enough to support infrastructure demand, even while pressuring models and margins at the new frontier labs. Or buyers could just discover that the reliability, distribution, and integration matter more than just the benchmarks. And those possibilities point all in different directions, which is why a model announcement alone is not going to be a stock thesis. So did Kimi K3 erase America's AI lead? Honestly, that framing outruns the evidence. Moonshot has announced an impressive and a massive new challenger. Outside reviewers are reporting pretty strong capabilities, but the complete weights, broad independent testing, and real-world adoption evidence are still well ahead of us. The stronger conclusion is going to be this. Kimi K3 has changed the negotiation before it settled the competition. Today, save one real task. After the weights arrive, run out comparity, full run economics, and exit safety. Switch only the work Kimi K3 earns. If you want the exact evaluation sheet and framework how I would approach this, tell me which task you want tested and subscribe for the follow-up after the full weight release and independent rules. Catch you on the next one.